Good morning. I got my phone on public today, so should come in live on time today. We looked at the finishing of chapter 5 of Galatians today. We'll finish the book tomorrow. But in chapter 5, Paul talks about a Christian household and husband and wife relationships, and it's more, it seems to be about the husband, love your wives, and it's, women, respect your husband, but it's to have this mutual love, respect, commitment to each other, to know that we're in this together. It isn't, we're not against each other, we're not competing with each other, we're to try to work together for the good of the household. But he was talking about living as a Christian community, and where we begin today, verse 17 says, "So do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." To live as best you can. To not. I mean, he talked about some of the sins, as he had mentioned in Galatians 6 there, the fruits of the Spirit, fruits of the flesh. And he reminded us that we were dead in sin, but now that we are alive in Christ, and we have this new creation within us. So we are to live being filled with the Spirit and being, he says in verse 21, be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. To remember that, we are to love one another as Christ loved us. And this is the reverence for Christ, knowing that Jesus gave everything for us. And he's going to start talking, in the very next verse, in verse 22, about our marital relationship, husbands and wives. And of course, verse 22, I have it underlined, women, be subject to your husbands as you are to the Lord. Women have just as many rights as men do. and it's, this was a kind of the patriarchal system of the day. And, it's not so awfully many years ago that, there were some churches that women couldn't vote. And there are many yet today that women cannot be pastors. They're not to lead worship. But it is so archaic. We are all the same. We're created the same, and we have the same abilities and the same needs and the same wants. And so as he goes on, he says, be subject to your husband as you are to the Lord. But then 25, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. This is a big commitment, and it works both ways. Love your wives, love your husbands as Christ loved the church. Be willing to give up stuff. Be willing to compromise. Be willing to go the distance. Be willing to commit. When we get married, we make a commitment, and most of us have made it before God and witnesses. When we've been married in a church, we ask God's blessing to be upon our church. And Paul reminded us not so long ago there, he does in this chapter that he says, verse 31, this is the reason a man will leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two become one flesh. And we are a new creation in our marriage, just as we are a new creation in Christ with the forgiveness and that comes in and through God that way. And it's just a reminder to us of our dependence upon one another. It's really nice to have a companion, someone that you count on, that is going to be there. And I understand that not all marriages are great marriages, and not all husbands treat their wives well, and not all wives treat their husbands well. And not all people can figure out a way to get along. But we are to do the very best. We are to try our very hardest to be in this committed relationship and to make it work. And a big part of it is that commitment. And in today's society, it seems that so many people go into marriage with the idea that, well, I'm going to give it a try for a while. And I mean, and maybe not so much, those of us that are a little bit more down to earth, but in those influencers and in those movie stars and in those people that are in the center of attention. And I think, all of the attention that's focused on one singer and a football player right now. And to me, give them privacy. Let them, their private lives should be private. And what they do should be private, but yet they're in the public eye. And it's hard not to be in that public eye and have people looking and watching every step they make. And the news media, the paparazzi, and all of these people that want to make a name for themselves in whatever are, in so many ways, I think, contributing to the downfall of the human relationships that could come about that way. But Paul is reminding them and you and me that, we need to be committed to each other, work with each other. And rather than these people that are trying to dig up dirt on people and make a big sensation out of things, support them, encourage them, and all of those. But, it just doesn't work that way. Paul says in in verse 28, I quoted part of it, in the same way husbands should love their wives as they love their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. And I think about that. If you don't love yourself, if you're not content with who you are, can you really completely love someone else? I mean, and we all have flaws. We all have things that are wrong with us. We all have things we need to work on. But yet, to be content with who you are, to love self. I mean, to think about it. I mean, are you happy with who you are? And just to be happy with who you are doesn't mean that you love yourself. But to be proud of who you are, to know that you are doing as much as you can for yourself and for others, to live together, to strive for mutual harmony and peace. Maybe I should say it that way. Paul writes something like that. But verse 29, he says, no one hates his own body, but he nourishes it and tenderly cares for it as Christ does the church. I mean, we try to take care of ourselves. If you get you get a cut, you break a bone, whatever. I mean, something goes wrong, you start feeling sick. What do? You take some medicine, you go to the doctor. We take care of ourselves. And just as the way we take care of our own physical body, this is the way we are to take care of our marriage, our relationship with our spouse, and then to go beyond our spouse, to go, further out into family and community, to be the very best we can in living this new life that we've been given in Christ. And the very last thing that Paul says in chapter 5, as it's broken out, each of you, however, should love his wife as himself, and a wife should respect her husband. And I think part of love is respecting, and supporting, and as I've said, it works both ways. Love isn't a one-way street. Marriage isn't a one-way street. It's a partnership. And I pray that your partnership with your spouse is fulfilling and life-giving, as Christ is life-giving to each and every one.